Fuck. Seriously? So what the fuck was I talking about before? Like, what is that point? Take 2. In this video, I'm going to give you a little insight into why I hate CrossFit and what it's like to be on both sides of the fence. All right. My name is Laith and I've been a CrossFit coach, box owner for the past 11 years or so. And I've been doing CrossFit for 11 years as well. What I want to talk about in this video is what I've learned over the last 11 years of coaching CrossFit and seeing athletes perform CrossFit, and why I feel there's certain weaknesses within CrossFit as a methodology if done incorrectly. Today, I tap into my love-hate relationship and take aim at the very brand and industry that consumes my life. So let's get into it. I think that was good. Maybe. I need to put a disclaimer on this video before we get started because I know there's a few people out there that are going to start to attack what I'm going to say. And I've always advocated for CrossFit for many reasons, mainly the community that it creates, the motivation it gives people to come into the gym every single day. As a methodology, it's not as bad as people might make it out to seem. Obviously, if it's done correctly with the right structure, then it can be a very potent methodology to help people get healthy and fit. At the end of the day, we need people to move in whatever capacity that is, and CrossFit, I think, does that better than any other methodology out there. My issue with CrossFit can be summarized into 8 points. 8 points. First issue with CrossFit is the simplicity, or how easy it is to become a coach. And you're level 1, which is a weekend course, and then you can technically own and operate and coach CrossFit. If you look at CrossFit, it is probably one of the most complex and confusing methodologies out there because it borrows from so many different disciplines, and it includes gymnastics and plyometrics and Olympic lifting and powerlifting, strength and conditioning. There's so many aspects within that, yet it only takes somebody 2 days to be qualified to be able to start coaching that. It's not always a problem per se, but what happens is that if there's no backbone within a gym or a box, the problem starts to happen that coaches start to go out on a limb when they try to help people with non-traditional issues, whether it's a back injury or knee injury or issues that they're facing within CrossFit that the coach might not have enough experience to deal with. Now, if they have a backbone, that means more experienced coaches that are there to guide them and help them, then that problem is solved. But in most cases, a lot of those gyms don't have that backbone to kind of give a bit of guidance and help that is a bit more scientific, a bit more structured when it comes to the CrossFit methodology. So the second point is the talent of the coaches. And when we look at talent, I think CrossFit is very unique with this regard, that you have so many different disciplines of their own right needs somebody that's an expert to be able to detect and understand the proper movements within that. So we look at gymnastics, for example, as one discipline within CrossFit, but we also look at things like powerlifting and Olympic lifting, which is again a discipline that people take years and years and years to start to understand how to coach it properly, the cues, the scalability of it. This is where, in my opinion, coaching a good CrossFit coach is so much more talented than coaches within other disciplines, because they have to dig in to so many different disciplines and understand it, and it takes years and years and years of practice to be able to get to that ability and understanding to detect the faults that exist, how to scale it, and make sure everybody stays safe. So within one workout, you could have 4 or 5 different disciplines if you have snatches in there, and then you have the bit of gymnastic work, and then you have some plyometrics in there. And you're doing this in a big class where you have 10, 15 people, and you're trying to keep your eye on every single person within that. You really need to have a talented coach to be able to detect everything very quickly, give the cue, fix it, and move on from there. And this can be very tricky because not all coaches are able to see things in that light. So my third issue is the scalability of the workouts. And when you look at a box that has a wide range of abilities and experience when it comes to fitness and health and wellness, and you get that into one class where you have 10 or 12 people that have different needs, have different backgrounds, the workout becomes tricky to scale everybody's ability to get the same stimulus out of that workout. And what I mean by that is, if somebody's been working out or doing CrossFit for the last 5 years, for example, and somebody that just graduated the Elements or the Fundamentals program, and you give them one workout to do, how can I ensure that the stimulus that I'm getting out of the workouts are the same for both people? And this is where the coach or the programmer that's doing the program needs to be able to understand that on that day that these people come in, I need to be able to understand how can I scale this down or scale this up to be able to get the same stimulus for those people. And this is where a bit of that problem of talent comes in as well, where I should be able to, on the spot, be able to change, modify, increase or decrease weights based on that person's ability, but yet still get the same stimulus out of that workout. What am I going to change this movement to, and I don't risk injuring these people or load them up when they can't do certain movements? Can we go from an overhead squat to a front squat, for example? Or can we go into a back squat? Or can we go into a goblet squat? Are these all varieties of a squat that we can give to a beginner, for example, and leave that overhead squat position for more advanced athletes? So my fourth point, when I look at CrossFit, and one of the things I've noticed over the years is the excessive amount to push limits. And this could take quite a few different forms, but if we look at it as an individual, and there's nothing wrong with this per se, but when we go into the CrossFit environment, it's always about being competitive and pushing your numbers and seeing how much more you can do. The issue that I have with that is when I get people doing that, but keeping them in a safe zone of kind of pushing their limit and not going overboard, we're okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. Every human wants to see where their potential is, and they always want to see progress and improvement. And there's nothing wrong with that. Where the issue becomes is when I give people a limit to push beyond and they break down. And most beginners don't know where their limits are, and that's where we get people throwing up or getting rhabdo, for example, or busting their shoulder or their back, because they've seen the people around them and they're kind of doing X amount on a deadlift and they're like, oh, I should be able to do that, and they rip the bar from the floor, even though they've been sitting at a desk for the past 8 to 12 hours per day for the last 20 years, and now they decide they want to challenge themselves with a deadlift. But if we know, or the coach is experienced enough to be able to tell where people's limits are and just very gradually and linearly increase and push those limits in a safe zone, we don't have a problem with that. The problem is egos get in the way. And when the egos get in the way and people see and friends and people are encouraging them, that's where things start to break down. And this is where the injuries start to happen. It's an issue that I honestly can't say that we can adjust it or fix it, because it's human nature to be in that environment. It's subjective. When I ask a person what your limit is, they're not going to know that, especially as a beginner. But if we know a more advanced athlete and their deadlift is a 300-pound deadlift, for example, then trying to do a 285 deadlift in a workout is just not going to be the smart thing to do. It goes back to the coach again to be able to manage that class properly without people hurting themselves. I think this is a fourth or third. I can't remember. Old age maybe affects my memory. The next point is when we look at longevity, which is what has kind of evolved for me when I started CrossFit and I had that more competitive mentality. Now it's gone into maybe living a healthier and longer life without needing knee replacement or back surgery or anything like that. But if we look at the formula of what longevity is, but in general, you're looking at a bit of resistance training, a bit of aerobic work, that should give us a good platform to continue life comfortably. The issue with CrossFit is that although strength training is there, although kind of metcons, which is more, let's say, aerobic in nature, and it addresses many dimensions within health and wellness, and that's great. The problem is the dosage that we get, and I think a lot of the studies are showing now that anything in excess of an hour, it becomes too much. What I've noticed over the last 11 years of doing this is that people are never satisfied with just doing that class, where there's a bit of strength training, that metcon, and you kind of do some stretches and go home. What tends to happen is that they start to want to learn those new skills, and even those skills might be a bit lower impact, you're still putting pressure onto the body, whether it's kipping or handstands or handstand walks, or kind of learning how to do the snatches or the cleans and getting better at that. And because CrossFit is so deep in movements that it takes years and years and years of constant practice and work to get better at them, people start to do that hour class and then they start to do their own thing after that. Part of it is kind of not doing things that complement the programming. They start to do other things on their own, which starts to impede their recovery. And the other element of it is that they're going beyond what they need for longevity, for you to live a healthier life. And what I've noticed is that very rarely do you get a person that gets into CrossFit that's satisfied with only doing that class and going home. It's a very rare thing for most people to experience. So my sixth point, that when I look at beginner, I'm talking about your history or your age of training, how long you've been training properly, which is how long they've been lifting weights or doing things that are similar to what CrossFit is. For how many years have they been doing that? And that's your training age, not your biological age. If I take somebody that's never lifted weights, the way I program for them is going to be very different than somebody that's been lifting weights for the past 10 years. So we look at a beginner versus a more advanced person. And the beginner, generalizing here, but they might require more single leg, single arm work, more stability work, learning how to use those muscles that they have, connecting the mind to the muscle, creating platform for them to build on later on when they get into more complex movements like kipping or muscle ups. If I was to take anybody within my gym and program for them, it would take years maybe for them to stay on that program for a while. And with small dosages of more complex movements thrown in there, but not under fatigue. But how many people will be comfortable going into CrossFit and doing that for a couple of years without doing those sexy movements that everybody wants to do? People won't put in the time to do the basics to prevent injury in the future when they kind of get into more volume and more complex movements later on down the road. And this is probably the biggest issue that we face within this, is that everybody sees everybody else in the gym kind of doing muscle ups and they're like, oh, I want to do that. But that person doing it has spent the last 5 or 6 years kind of building that platform before they get to there. And what I've noticed is people that rush this process are the people that get injured. And the injuries that they face is because they haven't put in the time to build a proper base to work off of. And without the proper base, things start to break down. How many people are willing to put in or take 10 years to get to that goal when they've only started CrossFit now? And most people won't want to do that. And I think this is point 7. I've lost track, to be honest. And my question becomes, how many of those movements are necessary for general population for health and wellness? And I'll use the snatch as an example because maybe I have a bit of hatred towards snatches. How much is it going to add value to a person's longevity or health or wellness by doing kind of heavy snatches or doing snatches in a workout under fatigue? When you have a person sitting at their desk hunched over all the time in this position, and then you kind of give them a heavy barbell to start doing snatches with, are we helping or hindering their health? And my answer, in my opinion, from what I've noticed, we're taking away from their longevity, we're taking away from their health, and giving them an injury in their shoulders or in their back because of these movements becomes debatable whether they should be included within that. Progress equals happiness. So if humans see that there's progress within whatever they're doing in their lives, they become happy. And that dopamine in the system is released, and they're happy with what they're doing. And that's why CrossFit is very addictive, because there's always progress to be made. But I'll debate the issue of, are all those movements needed? So to conclude, I mean, there's a lot of points that I talked about, and these are my personal observation over the last 11 years or so, and being the person that's been programming for our gym over the last few years. What I've noticed with the athletes that have come through and with the coaches that I've trained and built as a team, these are the issues that I've faced with them. And when I look at CrossFit as a methodology, as a theory of what people are doing, there's nothing wrong with that per se, and I'm not against it. I'll always advocate it, and I still do CrossFit as a person, and I love that feeling, that exhaustion once in a while, and it's a great feeling to be part of that community and be part of people that are like-minded, because habits are done or are sustained because of that, and that's great. But without proper structure within the gym, without proper experience, without proper credentials when it comes to health and movement and understanding how people should move in all these different disciplines, and being able to keep people in a safe environment where they're not going to hurt themselves, it really takes a solid team to be able to do that and deliver on that without jeopardizing people's health and wellness. So I'll see you on my next video. Hopefully I'm going to be able to do more of these over the next months or so. That's my objective for this year. I want to give out as much information as I can through these videos. So you can subscribe to my channel, or you can put a comment below if you don't agree with what I'm saying, or if you have different thoughts, or if you've experienced something else as a coach, as a CrossFit coach as well, that you find being problematic. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and I hope to see you on my next video.